Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Well, Katie, that's plain sight. I mean, that is pretty much in plain sight. I mean,
you know, and I was there at that press conference, Chris, and I asked him if it gave him pause to do that, to call on a foreign government to hack into the email of a private citizen, even if that citizen was a public citizen, frankly, in this country. And he said, no, it did not give him pause. Listen, here's what we know. WikiLeaks helped Donald Trump. The WikiLeaks leak and all of the Podesta emails helped Donald Trump's campaign. The intelligence community believes that WikiLeaks got those emails from Russia. Russia, or somebody who was affiliated with the top-level people in Russia, emailed Don Jr. and said, we have information from the Russian government that will hurt Hillary Clinton and help you.
The timing of the Russian overture to Donald Trump Jr. in June of last year again raises the question of what the president knew and when he got to know it. Let's take a look at the timeline. In April of 2016, the DNC discovered that Russian intelligence agencies broke into their computer network to steal their files. On June 3rd, intermediary Rob Goldstone offered Donald Trump Jr. dirt on Hillary Clinton, which he described as part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump. Trump responded, Trump Jr. did, I love it. 4 days later, on June 7th, Donald Trump previewed or teased an upcoming speech on Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, promising to reveal damaging information. Let's watch him.
I am going to give a major speech on probably Monday of next week, and we're going to be discussing all of the things that have taken place with the Clintons. I think you're going to find it very informative and very, very interesting.
Wow. Well, 2 days later, Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort sat down with that Russian lawyer on the promise that she would deliver Russian-sourced dirt on Hillary Clinton. Well, 3 days later, on June 12th, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks announced that he was in possession of emails relating to Hillary Clinton. On June 14th, the Washington Post first reported that Russian intelligence had breached the DNC. Well, we know that one now. Then the first Russian-hacked DNC file was released the following day on June 15th. And despite the fact that Kushner, Manafort, and Donald Trump Jr. were told in that email that the Russian government was helping their candidate, the campaign issued this statement. We believe it was the DNC that did the hacking as a way to distract from the many issues facing their deeply flawed candidate. In other words, they just doffed it off. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. We now know it was the White House that wrote that statement for Donald Trump Jr. on Saturday, the one that said the president's son met with the Russian lawyer last summer to discuss a Russian adoption program. The person who signed off on that bogus statement, according to the New York Times, was President Trump himself, which tells us the man leading the Russian cover-up now is the President of the United States. This is where we are in this exploding expose. With the President himself trying to plug the spigots, Donald Trump is playing the role of chief White House plumber, while a few dozen associates are leaking out under every West Wing door. Well, in public, the White House is doing its best to spin, trying to convince everyone there's nothing to see here when it comes to Donald Trump Jr.'s emails. Well, behind the scenes, however, the administration seems to be flailing. The president is fuming, even at his own lawyer, and senior aides are eyeing each other with suspicion right now. Yesterday, we found out that the president's son tried to set up that meeting with someone he thought was bringing him incriminating information, dirt, in other words, about Hillary Clinton, straight from the highest levels of the Kremlin. He was told that Russia supported his dad. Well, his response to all this, I love it. Well, today, President Trump told Reuters he didn't have knowledge of his son's meetings with the Russian lawyer until a couple of days ago, but he didn't fault his son for doing so. Quote, I think many people would have held that meeting. And this morning, he tweeted about Donald Trump's performance on Hannity. My son Donald did a good job last night. He was open, transparent, and innocent. This is the greatest witch hunt in political history. Sad. Someone who disagrees with him about this witch hunt is the man he nominated to be the new FBI director. Today, Christopher Wray testified at his confirmation hearing and defended the probe by Robert Mueller. Let's watch.
Do you believe that in light of the Don Jr. email and other allegations that this whole thing about Trump campaign in Russia is a witch hunt? Is that a fair description of what we're all dealing with in America?
Well, Senator, I can't speak to the basis for those comments. I can tell you that my experience with Director
I'm
Mueller—
asking you, as the future FBI director, do you consider this endeavor a witch hunt?
I do not consider Director Mueller to be on a witch hunt.
That was a good question, a good answer. Meanwhile, the New York Times and the Washington Post today both paint portraits of a White House in crisis. According to the Washington Post, quote, President Trump is enraged that the Russian cloud still hangs over his presidency and is exasperated that his eldest son and namesake has become engulfed by it. Peter, thank you for joining us. I just want to get to your story first because, you know, I think Trump's leading the cover-up. I mean, why is he signing off on a bogus account of his son's meeting with the Russian lawyer?
Well, I think he was coming back from Europe, had a meeting with Vladimir Putin and thought he had been able to finally put things behind him at least a little bit, give him some breathing room, and then this thing comes up. So he's on Air Force One coming home, and his staff is there huddled in the cabin having to deal with the response to this story. He doesn't craft the statement himself, but we're told by people who are close to the situation that he did, in fact, sign off on it. And you're right, the original statement was incomplete, to say the least. It suggested the meeting was about adoption policy. In Russia, that meant, of course, sanctions that had that had been promulgated by the United States. But even that didn't fully, of course, describe the meeting, because the point that Donald Trump Jr. was taking the meeting for was because he thought he was going to get some incriminating information about Hillary Clinton.
You know, this week, of all people, Trey Gowdy said, end the drip, drip, drip. Talk about every Russia meeting you had since you saw Dr. Zhivago. Get it out. And here's the president, instead of ending the drip, 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 is playing the role of cover-up king. He's out there saying, well, we're going to cover up each one of these meetings. We're going to try to mask them the best possible way we can and deny any guilt. Instead of getting it all out, he's covering up.
Seems to confirm some things that people have suspected a long time, which is that he has a direct hand in some of these lies that are coming out of the White House instead of trying to get out.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the spokesperson, was asked today about the stream of damaging news stories coming out drip by drip. Her response, it's not a problem for the White House. Catch this. Talk about spin. It's a problem for the media. That's what she says. Let's watch her.
Sarah, I want to ask you, the drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration.
I think it's actually undermining the credibility of the media, because they drip, drip, drip a lot of things that don't seem to have much to do about nothing.
That's not the media saying that. This is Trey Gowdy, the Republican from South Carolina, saying this drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration. So what do you say to Congressman Gowdy?
I think I just answered that.
We're going to bring in right now U.S. Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He's on the Intel Committee. Congressman, this is a classic example. Whatever Trump's hiding, it must be worth hiding because he's paying a price for it. He's not joining the effort the press is involved with in finding out what happened. He's joining the effort fronted there by Sanders to cover it up, and he's covering it up himself by signing off on a document that is a bogus account of what that meeting with the Russian was about. Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts, Chris, are we need all of the Republicans who have put out tweets or put out statements about this and how frustrating it is. We need them to actually do something about it. You know, actions speak louder than tweets. And there's an independent commission bill that every Democrat and 2 Republicans in Congress have called for that can take this outside of Congress and get to the bottom of what happened. We need more Republicans to step up and do that. I'm looking for more action, Chris, because I think this is an inflection point in this investigation, and it's time for them to start putting, their money.
It's your call. You're a member of Congress, but we have a House Committee on Intelligence. We've got a Senate Committee on Intelligence, both investigating. We've got a special counsel, Bob Mueller, investigating. What's one more tribunal group going to do to get the truth?
Well, I think the best way, the most comprehensive way to get the truth is what they did after September 11th. They took it outside of the Capitol. They had bipartisan, independent, appointed experts look at this, because I think most of your viewers at home, Chris, all they want is for this to never happen again. Regardless of what happens with the criminal investigation, no one wants to find ourselves in a position where a foreign adversary worked with the campaigin to undermine an election.
I think people like me want to see heads rolling. Hold on there, Congressman. I'm not him. The truth is not enough. Let's go with you.
Yeah, about this situation.
Yes.
Well,
Well, you were one of the guys asking the question of Huckabee getting nothing. I know you liked her, but we got nothing out of her. She's just stonewalling.
Well, and that speaks to a broader dynamic in the White House, which is that all of these senior officials are really unwilling to talk much about the Russia matter. There was not a robust defense from the White House of Donald Trump Jr., and that's because no one wants to get too far out ahead of this and create their own legal exposure and make themselves a target somehow of the Mueller investigation.
I mean, they don't want to flack, but they let her.
Well, they're going to say
almost nonsensical flackery, which is to say, oh, it's hurting you guys to be breaking a new story every hour. That's a nonsensical. The only reason we have any truth here. Certainly, Trump has held back all information. His family has been completely stonewalling. The only reason we have any truth is the press.
That's exactly right. And what we've seen in the last couple of days is every time the New York Times gets new information, that's when the White House reacts. That's when Don Trump Jr.
He hates
reacts.
the truth.
And that's how we're getting the information out.
This is something that needs to be looked into further. All of us as journalists need to look into further the fact that when this meeting was taking place, we know for a fact from the media reports that Trump was physically present at Trump Tower. Furthermore, we also know that that morning, a couple hours before, he had a luncheon where Manafort was. So he was interacting with the people the senior people who were having that meeting that day. We need to look into more exactly what Trump knew.
That's right.
Let's go to Peter Baker of the Times. You had the big story today. Do we have that sort of dramatis personae figured out? How many people were involved in this? I would assume, I've said this before last night, to try to be bipartisan on this or nonpartisan. If Chelsea Clinton had such a meeting with a Russian, vaguely weird person coming over from Putin land, if she'd had that meeting, they'd be doing it. They'd be out the tar and feather, her mother and everybody else. It is not something that anybody would let go by unless you're a total partisan. What do we know about Trump's physical knowledge of what happened in that meeting last June?
Well, we don't have a lot of knowledge about that. He told our colleagues from Reuters today that he only learned about that meeting a few days ago when it came up as part of this story, and that he did not know about it at the time. Donald Trump Jr.
Why did he say he was going to give a speech with a lot of dirt on Hillary after that happened? I mean, that's a hell of a coincidence.
Thing, right? No, it is a very interesting coincidence if that's what it is. Just hours after Donald Trump Jr. hits the button saying, yes, let's have this meeting, his father gives a victory speech at the last primary day saying he would give major speech about Hillary Clinton's crooked dealings with the Russians and other foreign governments. That is, in fact, a rather interesting set of timing. And you've got to imagine that investigators are going to be sitting there studying this timeline as emails then begin to come out and other things begin to happen over the course of the summer.
Let me go to the Congressman again. Congressman Swalwell, why isn't there sort of a beginning, at least, thought about the president's role covering this thing up, the president's people, his whole family, in fact, involved in this thing? Why isn't there a sense that this is more of a criminal or perhaps impeachable offense than simply something to try to figure out for history?
Well, first, Chris, we don't want to be as irresponsible with the facts as the president is. So we want to gather all the facts through our investigations, which he has, as you know, obstructed every step along the way and has made it a lot harder for us to do the work that we have to do. So once we gather the facts, then we look at, okay, what reforms do we put in so this doesn't happen again? Who has to be held accountable in whatever way that is, criminally or through the House Judiciary Committee? But we aren't able to do that right now because every time we make progress, the White House has reared its head into our investigation. So if he stays out of the way, I think we can report back to the American people.
Okay, let me ask you what you would do. You're an elected official from California. What would you do if he found a way to fire Mueller? What would you do?
That's a red line. That's a red line.
What would you do?
I think that goes to the House Judiciary Committee. That's a red line.
Impeachable.
Yeah. Well, that would be. I think he already is under investigation for obstruction for firing Comey. At least Democrats would like to see that in the House Judiciary Committee. So Mueller, I think that's a red line.
What we do know from reporting over the last several weeks is that this is something the president has thought about off and on. That's not to say there's an operative plan, but he's frustrated with the investigation and he's contemplated how he might go about getting rid of Mueller.
You remember Rosenstein also equivocated.
Have you, journalists, all three of you cover the White House, and you, Phil, because you're in there today, have you ever learned anything of truth in a White House press briefing under this president? Anything you can point to that you didn't know before, that wasn't rolling disclosure, that you actually learned in one of those crazy briefings?
Sure, there's truth.
You've actually learned some things.
They roll out scheduling items. Sarah today talked about what the trip in France would be like. That's all true.
Something of substance. Have they ever given out any truth in this administration? Has anybody, is Spicer or Huckabee given anything from the president that they can actually share with the American people since they're getting paid to do it?
Well, most of the answers we hear are trying to hide things and blur the details and not provide a lot of context or information.
A lot of people do end up talking about this because they are, in fact, trying to set blame elsewhere. There's a lot of circular firing squad going on right now in the White House, and people are pointing fingers. How did this get messed up, and why are we talking about this? And they're pointing fingers to each other.
We also got the bit of late breaking news. This video, shot exclusively by NBC, shows Donald Trump in 2013 attending a birthday party in Moscow for his former business partner, Aris Agalarov, a man he tied to Vladimir Putin, of course.
Donald Trump was in Trump Tower at that time. This meeting happened on the 25th floor. Donald Trump's office was on the 26th floor. This meeting was attended by Paul Manafort, by Jared Kushner, by Don Jr., Donald Trump's most senior advisors, even though two of them were in formal, unofficial roles. Still, it's his closest confidants. I talked to people in the campaign, and there is one faction that says, you know what, Donald Trump, he absolutely would have known about this.
If Chelsea Clinton had sat down with a Russian whatever agent of Putin's like this and had this kind of meeting and brought in a bunch of people from the campaign, there's not a single conservative or right-winger in this country that wouldn't believe implicitly, intuitively, she told her mom.
Well, there's another...
So this idea that somehow Donald Trump was keeping secrets of his success from his father doesn't pass this.
Well, there's another factor here, and Katie's right. There's no smoking gun showing that Don Jr. talked to Don Sr. about this, but this all came from Donald Trump's business partner in Russia, the guy who did Miss Universe with him, his only successful venture in Russia. He wanted to do a Trump Tower with him, and it came through Emin, the son, the pop star. I'm told, I've done a lot of reporting on this, that Donald Trump had a very warm relationship with Emin. So it's almost, to me, inconceivable that Donald Trump Jr. wouldn't say that Aris and Emin have been telling me that the Russian government, Putin, wants to help you. And so that's a big, big factor.
If a son has a smoking gun that he believes or information that might sink Hillary Clinton, that he says, I love it, that naturally he would tell his father, especially considering that these are folks that his father has known for a long time that are bringing this information to the table.
Manafort, the chairman at the time of his campaign, was in the room with the Russian, and so was Jared, his son-in-law. He's been very protective of his son-in-law.
On June 9th, Kushner, Manafort, and Don Trump Jr. definitely know that a Putin crony and Trump's business partner are conspiring to get information to help Trump. So 6 days later, 6 days later, after the DNC hack is revealed, the Trump campaign says the DNC is doing this, not Russia. It's a hoax. And then in July, Donald Trump Jr. says the same thing. So this is the point, Chris. They were protecting Russia, knowing Russia was trying to help them. This is a big deal that they can't escape.
Trump finally delivered that speech he had promised about Secretary Clinton. He made a point of saying that he believed Clinton's emails were vulnerable to hackers and suggested that foreign countries may already have a blackmail file on Clinton. Here he is.
Well, we may not know what's in those deleted emails. Our enemies probably know every single one of them. So they probably now have a blackmail file over someone who wants to be the president of the United States.
Well, 2 weeks later, in July of last year, former FBI Director James Comey said that there was no evidence of Clinton's files' private server being hacked. And later that same month, Trump publicly encouraged the Russians, who had already hacked the DNC, to go after Clinton's personal email. All we know is they had meeting after meeting about sanctions, including the one that they said was about sanctions on these, about adopting kids from Russia. That was, even then they admitted it was the sanctions. They had the meetings with Kislyak, the meetings with Lavrov, all this about and all the time they're having meetings about relieving sanctions, obviously. They're rooting for the Russians to go after Hillary. There's a lot of collusion out here in public that you don't have to dig for.
And the other thing is, following up on what Katie said, for months after that, give me your emails or get the emails, Donald Trump kept denying that the Russians were involved. He did it in the debates. He did it after the election. All that time, his people around him knew that the Russians were after Hillary and trying to help him. So he's out there.
I think he's leading the cover-up. I've said that all night.
But this is aiding and abetting Russia when he had reason to know what they were doing.
He doesn't care. Of all the dumb responses to this is to say that the president's son is dumb. Donald Trump Jr., who he's left his empire to run, doesn't have the smarts to know you don't deal with the Russians to try to fix an election.
There are an awful lot of things competing for dumbest explanation and dumbest excuse here. I think my favorite is saying, well, what they did is not technically treason. And when you're making that argument, you're probably not winning the argument. But yeah, over and over again, we're hearing, he was naive, a rookie mistake. We've heard rookie mistakes so many times that how did these guys field a team? I mean, we're 6 months into the administration now. You can't say rookie mistake over and over again. At some point, there's just plain incompetence. There's mismanagement, and certainly in the way it's handled. And clearly, a lot of us have been warning about nepotism.
And you're hearing from lawmakers on Capitol Hill, well, he's a kid, right? A 39-year-old in these days are kids. What's interesting about what you pointed out, too, is that's long been the defense of Donald Trump among Republicans. He's new to politics. He can't quite know what relationships are good and
He went to the meeting in the arms of Paul Manafort, the chairman, who's Mr. Russia, who knows all about dealing with Russia.
Exactly.
And, of course, Jared Kushner, who he gives a portfolio, which includes the globe. It isn't like the kid went off on his, he's not a kid, went off on his own.
And that's what's key here, too, is that Kushner is the only person now that works in the White House. The security clearance, of course, is a big question. Democrats calling for that to be revoked. The security clearance forms are what have brought out all these supposedly immemorable meetings
who's a
with
Republican
Russians.
expert here? Anybody? Okay, I'll try again. Why are the Republicans, I know the people from the Rocky Mountains, they got the South Dakota guy, he's a good, Thune's okay, and they've got Orrin Hatch, no problem with him. They're all smart people. Barrasso from Wyoming. They found all these people from the more rural areas, the western areas, that aren't really driven by the New York Times or the Washington Post. I get that. But to have them come out and play dumb. We don't care about it. If that were Chelsea Clinton, they'd be frying her and her mother in oil right now. This is absurd that it doesn't matter that the son or daughter of a president is engaged playing ball with the sleazeballs from Moscow.
This is because of the Republicans. These leaks are coming from the White House. These leaks are coming from Republicans. You've got Republicans who sold their souls to be a part of this administration. They're angry that they've been marginalized, sidelined, and that Trump is ruining their opportunity to get all their policy goals.
So the reason that Republicans are not going to separate themselves from Donald Trump is because look at the approval rating of Donald Trump among Republicans, 85 to 90%. I was asking Republicans all day on the Hill today, what would it take? And it would take a lot. Either their agenda is completely squashed, which they don't think it is yet, or there's some kind of criminal activity here, and they say they're not there yet. They haven't passed an appropriations bill on time in 6 years.
Wow.
Basic governance.